This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and a big welcome to the southern Australian city of Melbourne, where the Wallabies take on the British and Irish Lions in Saturday's second test match of the series. I can confirm that the Red Sea have arrived in Melbourne. The weather is overcast. There is a 70% chance of rain on Saturday night, and it's cool. It's around 12 degrees here in Melbourne. And like many of the Lions fans, I took myself along to the MCG last night to watch Hawthorn play Carlton in the AFL in front of a crowd of 51,000 on a coolish Thursday evening. So what did I learn about that? Well, first of all, a huge crowd for a game of AFL on a Thursday night. The second thing I observed is just the diversity of AFL crowds. There are kids, there are young people, there are girls, there are boys, there are young men, young women, there are people of all ages, sizes, shapes, and really the AFL can teach us a lot about how do you use sport to create community. The third thing that I took away is just the quality of the athletes and the challenge that there is here in Australia of all of our athletes are spread across the codes. And as I watched the game last night, I thought of so many of these players. Wouldn't they be great if they were available to play rugby in Australia? So it just confirms that ongoing challenge that rugby has in Australia, where we distribute our athletic talent across so many sporting matches. The fourth thing was just how remarkable the MCG is as a venue. It is absolutely compelling. When you walk into the place, it just takes your breath away, whether it's for cricket, for rugby, for AFL, for anything. It's just such a wonderful place. And really, the Melbourne City, as I was leaving, with the thousands of fans going back across the walk bridges as it connects from the city to the MCG, and looking at the skyline and looking at this magnificent city, the thought came to me: why is it that rugby union failed in Melbourne? Why did it fail in Victoria? Well, Ewen McKenzie, you are probably the greatest Victorian rugby player. You are a son of the soil. You are someone who was brought up in Victorian rugby. Why is it that rugby failed here in Victoria?
Well, I don't know if it's failed. It's been there a very long time. There's a very strong club competition that just percolates away in the background. What we've lost is the connection to the national team, and that was obviously via the Rebels, and that's as much about financial management and political manoeuvring and whatever else. But that loss of connection, I was in Melbourne myself last night, and everyone's wanting to know the answer. How can they reconnect? The Valetinis and these sort of guys who are from Melbourne. How do they connect back to the national game and not have to do what I had to do and basically move to Sydney? So there's a problem there now. Even prior to that, though, the Rebels are never going to get the Rebels or whatever the local team's going to be is not going to get the oxygen. The AFL, by its sheer power and its control over sponsorship and media and whatever, you won't get a lot of oxygen. Just like the Melbourne Storm doesn't get a lot of oxygen down there, yet they're still a very successful rugby league team. So I think what the rugby needs is the connection, the pathway connection, so that aspirants can find a way to get up there without having to leave town. That's what's broken at the moment. I think it was there before. I'm not personally not keen on the shrinking the game side of things, but that's what's happened. So now you've got to deal with finding a way to get those kids motivated, that they can see that they can get to the national level, and so therein lies the challenge. But there's still lots of rugby people down here, and they haven't disappeared, and there'll be plenty of rugby people in the future. It just doesn't get the oxygen, and never will, by virtue of the other sports down here that are the popular, as you've already described.
But can't you create a business? Can't you create a following? Why is it that rugby community didn't get behind the Rebels?
Well, I think there's a core of people that did do that, but it's the way that the game's structured. You get multiple games in a row. I personally, I like watching the games on TV because you watch one after the other. So the way that it's set up, the AFL experience is a longer experience. It's obviously got a lot of tradition to it, but it's longer. Like the rugby league or rugby union comes on TV, it'll be over, done and dusted. The AFL's still got another quarter to go, so it's a longer experience. People are used to that. I find it very long to watch as a spectacle, but I'm interested in the game per se. It's a completely different game. You've got an open game. There's no tight play. It's easy for people to follow. The umpiring, has its moments in AFL, but it doesn't decide the game. Whereas rugby's far more technical and whatever. If you've never played it, it's a far more difficult thing to comprehend. But people still get involved and watch it. And I know plenty of people are going to the game tonight, and they're not rugby people, but they're going for the event and whatever else. So Melbourne people are good watchers of sport, and I think the Rebels were well supported, as well as anyone else in recent times, as well as any of the other provinces. So it's just disappointing that they were given the chop.
Eddie Jones, you've been in and out of Melbourne hundreds of times over the years, coaching the Brumbies, doing camps with Essendon. I know you have a very strong connection to the Melbourne Storm. What's your thoughts about rugby in Melbourne?
Well, I think, as Ewan said, mate, I think to do well in Melbourne, it's difficult. It's difficult as a sporting team. So the Melbourne Storm have had some success because they've been able to win and they've attracted a following. And I think the Rebels, the big problem they had initially, they weren't able to establish a team that was immediately impactful in the competition. I think after that they were always behind the starting line, mate. Kept playing catch up. And I think there's enough talent down there in Melbourne to have a team that is not entirely Victorian, but based on Victorian players. You got your Valentinis, you got a huge Polynesian population in Victoria that plays rugby. So they need to be captured and they need to be brought through, and it needs to have a Melbourne feel about it.
Well, let's hope that the investment is made and this very vibrant community of rugby union here is looked after, and we do get to see, as Ewen McKenzie said, the opportunity for the young rugby players to be able to find a pathway through to the elite level here in Australia. So before we get into our preview, please a reminder to like and subscribe. More importantly, last week we had a massive jump in the number of viewers and listeners. I think it's because of Ewen McKenzie coming along. We absolutely, I think it was about three or four times the size. Eddie Jones, I don't know what we were doing. We got Ewen McKenzie. We solved the problem in a week. But we also are on the socials.
We'll see if they're there next week.
Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and also on Substack, where we are continuing to pursue this mission of how do we secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. On the Substack this week, we've got some great analysis by favourable matchups where we've jumped into the data. There's an editorial from me on why we need to join the North and the South, and indeed the guides to this weekend in Melbourne. So jump on to Rugby Unity at Substack. So we're going to jump into our preview now, and I know people probably haven't been, or maybe they have seen the teams, but I thought we might just go through the teams before we get into them. So the Australian team to take on the British and Irish Lions: Slipper, Parecki, Alatoa, Skelton, Frost, Valetini, McCright, Wilson, Gordon, Liner, Ikitau, Suali'i, Potter, Jorkinson and Wright. And the reserves are Pollard, Robertson, Bell, Williams, Gleeson, Tizano, McDermott and Ben Donaldson. And for the Lions, Porter, Sheehan, Furlong, Atoje and Chesham, Byrne, Curry and Cronin, Gibson Park is at halfback, Finn Russell, Aki Bundy, Hugh Jones, Freeman and Keenan. And the reserves are Genge, Kelleher, Stewart, James Ryan, Morgan, Owen Farrell, Mitchell and Blair Kinghorn, and the referee is Andrea Piatti from Italy. So they are our teams for the match on Saturday night, where the Wallabies have to win to keep the series alive. Ewen, McKenzie, your thoughts on the team that Joe Schmidt has picked for the Wallabies?
Well, I think it's probably predictable. I mean, all those changes were pretty much flagged. The 6-2 bench was flagged as well, so I can sort of see where they're going. I'm not quite sure where the coverage is on the bench is for the midfield. I guess Ben Donaldson must be covering the midfield, so that might give him a ball-playing option in the midfield, which would be interesting. I think that's a topic we can talk about a bit later, but ball-playing centres is something that Australia needs. So, they're going to obviously get stuck in up front. There's some change there. Parecki's been a very good defensive player. I don't know some of these guys personally. Eddie would be able to speak better, but he's always been used in that sort of midfield defensive role. He's quite good in line-out defence, quite good tackler. So I assume that, and he's a pretty good round the set piece. But he's not a big guy, so it's still a lightweight front row. Obviously bolstered in the second row, and Valetini is always going to give good value. So it's going to get down to how they play the game in the end. Still, we talked about the tactics prior to the first test, whether they're going to do anything different or go out there and just try and do more of the same, more of what they've been doing over the last 12 months. So that's probably, I'm more interested there. And I can't predict from the team selection what they're going to do, other than obviously they'll get value out of Skelton for maybe 40 or 50 minutes. Then it'll probably revert back if you're looking at the bench. Not all those forwards will get on the field, I think. I don't see how they can do that and maintain it, but they might end up with the two on-ballers on the field later in the game. I think the front row coming on will add some ball carry, which will be good. So I probably favour having some of the front rowers that are starting, but I don't think there's any surprises in the selection. It's just a question of how they play the game.
Eddie Jones, is this the team that you would have picked?
I think it's a pretty sensible selection, as Ewan said, mate. That if they were going to change the real context of the team and bring more aggressive ball carriers into the tight five, like Pollard and Bell, they're big changes. So they've brought in Skelton, who'll play. Generally plays on one side of the ruck. Skelton. He's not a high work rate player, but his carries around the ruck are good. Valetini's, probably been the best player for Australia over the last 4 or 5 seasons, so he gives you a good budgeted performance. And stuck with the backline, mate. Believe that's the best backline. They've stuck with it, so it's a pretty sensible selection.
Okay, so one of the biggest issues perhaps from last week was the slow start. You're both international coaches. When you've had a performance like that and you've had a start like that, how do you stop that happening a second time? Ewen McKenzie.
Well, I mean, the Lions did what we suggested the Wallabies might do and mix it up a bit. A short kick-off, as we said, short kick-off, ruck penalty, 3 points, then they scored again, 10 points. So they used quick taps, quick line-out throw-ins, all in the first 10 minutes. They really up-tempoed the game. So you have to be aware of those. They're all options in the game every week. So you can't be caught by surprise. So I think the Lions have already forecast that they're prepared to open the game like that. So Australia can't be surprised the second time round. You have to be ready for anything from the kickoff, and then and you've got to be awake. You can't be switched off. So you've got to be in the moment, focused on the game. The good thing about the MCG is you're a long way from the crowd, so it's actually quite easy to be able to communicate. Things like that will be much better for the team. So, and the focus should be more within the game because the crowd's a long way away. There's no distractions. You won't hear that noise. It'll be distant. It'll be loud but distant. So it should be much easier for everyone to focus and concentrate. But you've got to be prepared. The Lions were prepared to take risks last game, and I assume they'll probably do the same this time.
Eddie Jones, for you, how would you have set about trying to ensure that it doesn't happen again?
Well, you can never do that, mate. Like again, all you can do is try to put your team in the best position. But I think the interesting thing was was, as Ewen spoke about, the Lions kicked off differently. They kicked to the centre, right? And so what happened then was that Australia had probably been anticipating, because of the previous games, that they were going to get a long kickoff. And they were probably looking at two situations from that, to play a first ruck off 9 and then possibly play with a second line attack out wider the same way. And it looked like this when they got the centre field kickoff, that they played their one ruck, but then they went to the same side and they had Suwali carry, and the support play was really slow because it looked like it hadn't been planned, right? And now rugby, is very choreographed, particularly at the start of the game, particularly from kickoffs, and it looked like the players hadn't practiced that, and as a result they got turned over, and so a start to a series where you get a penalty right from the first kickoff puts you behind the 8 ball, and psychologically you get a bit offset. So what can Australia do either in terms of kickoff receipt or kickoff attack early to get in the game? So that's what they'd be thinking about. Like, where are the opportunities? Like, the Lions are probably consistently better in the air than Australia. So do they look at the slippery conditions, do a grubber kick, which has got at risk because the players generally aren't really good at doing that. They're not skilled enough to do that. I'm not sure whether Liner can do that, and you'd have to test him out during the week. But something a little bit different to try to get him on the front foot early from that kickoff, whether it be receipt or kickoff attack.
Mm. And for you and McKenzie?
Oh, well, I mean, Eddie's right. The grubber kick, with Quade Cooper, he and I used to practice that, so we could use it. We just kept practicing it every week. We just practice it, and maybe use it, maybe not. We use it once or twice, but you need to practice to be able to do it. Australia could have Liner standing there with the ball. They could put Suwali standing right next to him in the middle of the field, and the Lions will think, well, maybe they're going to kick off in the middle and Suwali's going to chase. All right, so then they might have to load up the centre of the field with some players, which might weaken the receiving groups on the edges, and suddenly they're one lifter short, and then you kick off short left or right. But they've suddenly got one man less, so less resources somewhere else. You need to watch. You need to obviously know their formations and then have a look and see if you can weaken a formation by moving people around, and then make a decision. If they don't mark up Suwali, you might kick to him, like they used to kick to Falau, little short kick off high. He just come up and bat the ball back, or kick off to where they've under-resourced somewhere else. So you just have to be ready. But the kickoff's a really important part of the game because it sets the tone, and we saw that in the first test. And I think that Australia, I don't think teams spend enough time on it personally. I think you've got to spend time there because it sets the mental tone for the game.
Mm. Would you agree, Eddie?
Yeah, well, I think, just thinking that through, Australia's got two potential advantages in the air from the kickoff. If Jorgensen against Lowe, and possibly getting Suwali on a one-on-one with one of the centres. Depending, they'll have their centres either around that centre field. So you look at options to try. Suwali's probably the one they'll mark up the most, who's the most obvious. But if you think back to the last game, Australia scored the try with Jorgensen beat Lowe in the air. Mm. So do you look at trying to get Jorgensen in the first contest? I reckon they just want to make the first kickoff a real contest and get stuck in and set the tone. Whether they do a grubber or put it in the air.
Yes, look for where Lowe is, try and land it straight on him and have someone bearing down. If they do chase Suwali centre field, does he catch the ball and take it forward? That's what I would do. If he hits it backwards, he gives them a chance to get back in the game. If the ball's loose on the ground, they might recover that situation. But the Crusaders used to do it. I'm a real fan of, that they used to kick straight up the field. Richie McCaw would go up there and bang, and then suddenly they're 3 points up and you're 30 seconds in the game. So there's no risk, I don't believe, especially if you've practiced it. So I just don't know if it's in the thinking. I'm not sure.
Mm. So looking back and analysing last week's first test, you and McKenzie, what did the Wallabies do well? What did they not do well? And where do they have to improve to win the game this weekend?
We talked about this a little bit the other day. I think the big advantage the big advantage for the Wallabies across the board is that they have their ability to compete at the tackle, compete for the possession at the tackle, I think is better than the Lions across the board. So I think if they play in a way that they don't run out of players at the breakdown in attack, so they play that way, then you can basically keep the Lions starved of possession, as long as you don't do anything stupid. And if you get a penalty, you kick for touch, and you can drive a line out and go back into the same process. So that's in attack. In defence, we've got to get guys with their hands on the ball. I think someone like Parecki, he'll add there. Valetini will be better. So we're quite good in that space. So we need to keep competing for possession. I noticed that Morgan's come onto the bench now for the Lions. So, they might recognise that I don't believe that the Lions have a great capacity to get the ball back from ruck attack. Because if you're picking and driving or whatever, I don't think they have a great skill set to be able to get that ball back legitimately. It's only if you make a mistake, and therefore the referee can be with you. So it's not the most exciting, attractive rugby, but in a test where you've got to win, it's got to be part of the game plan, because I just don't think they have a natural ability that they will contest briefly and then they tend to drop back into the defensive line and look for those tackling opportunities. So I think that we've got to play really quite direct and hard. I think Skelton will add value there. Valetini obviously is used almost like a centre by the Brumbies off lineouts and things, but they can all attack in close. And that's where I think they might, maybe later in the game, Pollard and those sorts of guys will make a difference in that direct carry. And Bell, we got back on the scoreboard in the second half, and those guys are on the field because they're all quite good at bending the line. And so I think if we can bend the line, make sure we don't get one out, and then I don't see how the Lions are going to get the ball back. So in a legitimate way, and therefore you got the referee in the game, and hopefully things happen for you, and the crowd comes with you, and you get some confidence. And it's not going to be like that for 80 minutes, but I think there'll be sections of the game where we really need to invest in being very direct and making sure that the Lions don't touch the ball. You just play keepings off for a while and see what the referee does.
Eddie Jones?
Well, I think the referee could be Australia's greatest friend, mate. Italian referee, first really big game. And Italian referees tend to like the contest. And as Ewen said, the Australians are probably better in that area. So they use the expression, let the contest breathe. And I reckon he'll do that. His history tends to suggest that he allows a bit more of a contest. So how can Australians get the Lions down there into the field and make them play a couple of phases, and then really go hard at them? And then as soon as you get the ball from a line out, I'd be going 7-man line out off the top. And as I said last episode, I get Suwali straight at Finn Russell. Like, what do you want? How can you light the crowd up? Like, get Suwali charging off the back fence straight at Finn Russell and make him make tackles. Do it the first line out, do it the second line out, do it the third line. Keep doing it. Keep making him make tackles.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, he doesn't matter what number you're wearing. You just want to get the big guy on that guy on their ball player, and do it as often as you can. So that's it's simple, but it's going to be easy, and I think it's going to suit the players that Australia have got to be able to then just concentrate on then just keep attacking into that zone and see what happens. But the one thing about the referee I noticed is I think he's a bit more interested in the gate. The gate was something that everyone used to talk about, your entry into the ruck. No one's ever worried about it. No, I haven't heard anyone mention the gate for a couple of years, but suddenly he was refereeing it last time I saw him. So the gate exists in some people's mind, and that's the entry into the ruck, that you've got to come through a theoretical gate, but also the clean out beyond. And I think that's an area we have to be disciplined. If we want to play into them, we're going to make sure that we don't get lazy and do lazy things like just fly in there and go off your feet. It's an easy penalty for a referee. Or you fly in there and you tackle someone 5 metres past the ball off to one side. They're easy and they're obvious, and that's where you get touch judges who like to get involved in the game, and they all start chattering in the referee's ear, and and you lose momentum there. So we have to be super disciplined. If we are going to try and drive wedges through them, we need to be very disciplined in that. Make sure we're not just flopping off our feet and making the game easy for the referee and bad for ourselves.
Eddie Jones, we saw, and we were discussing it offline after the Pacifica game during the week, the role of the TMO. What do you think that impact might be of the TMO this week, drawing a line through what we saw with the Pacifica on Tuesday night? What sort of impact is that going to have on the game?
You saw in that First Nations game, it was a game, I think it was ball in play, it was 32 minutes, 20 penalties. And then you add in the stoppages. I don't know what the ball out of play was, but whoever was the television broadcaster got good value because it was a long game, right? So, I don't know whether the Australian Rugby Union gets more money for long games. They need more money, so maybe that's what they need. But I think it's going to be a low ball in play game, high penalties, high intervention by the TMO probably. He's going to be relying on that TMO a lot. Mate, there was one stage there in the game on Tuesday night where there was 4 knock-ons, and the referee allows a try, and you're just thinking, like, how didn't he see those 4 knock-ons? Because he's relying on the TMO to pick up the knock-ons for him.
Yeah,
like it's got to the most absurd.
We're a long way from where it was, and if you go back to that Fiji test against Australia, where Fiji scores a try, and then they go back and find Potter put his foot and touched like 500 phases before, and so they say there's a no try. Look, I mean, if you're a part-time fan and you want to get someone to be a full-time fan, that's not how you do it, because everyone's sitting there going, what the hell's going on? I can't tell you what happened there, but it just looked wrong. And that's the problem. The TMO creates situations and stoppages in the game that no one can explain. And therefore, if you're sitting there with someone that you want to be a fan, they just don't get it. They lose interest and they start thinking about something else, or they're on their iPhone looking at what the AFL score is or something like that. Like, that's what happens. You've got to keep people engaged in the moment, and that's where. And Campo I was with Campo, and he made a point the other night. In the Test match in '91 World Cup, I think we had twice as many scrums in those games than we do now. But the scrums are over in 10 or 11 seconds. Right now they're 3 minutes. So there's a responsibility there for the game management side of it. It's not necessarily the players that are slowing things down. We've got to try and find ways to keep the game going, and find ways to make tries that are scored, not look for ways to not allow tries to be scored. Look, it used to be refereed by one guy. The game for a long time, just one guy stood out there and made decisions. He mightn't have got it all right, but the game moved along.
Do you have any solutions? Eddie Jones has a solution. Eddie, actually, why don't you share with us your TMO solution and see what Link thinks of that?
I just think we should go back, mate, to goal line decisions. You can go 3 phases before a goal line decision, and then any obvious red card offence that's been missed. Otherwise, if there's anything else, play on. Just the really big decisions that are crucial.
I think that's what other sports do. They don't, like, you can see other. I'm talking about league. You'll see a forward pass or something, but they don't bother replaying it because they know that the TMO can't rule on it, and so the commentators don't bother talking about it, and it just gets the tries awarded, and everyone knows it was a forward pass, but that's what it is. Move on. You don't hear about it again, and they don't wait, and the game just keeps going. So I think what Eddie's talking about, that you got to compartmentalise it and make it a brief moment and allow some adjudication, but not extensive, and only in certain. So I think the red card threshold's a good one. There's a lot of things going on in the game now that are putting people off the field for non-intentional acts. There's sort of clean-outs where there might be some contact or something like that. I just think it's just gone too far. And I think teams suffer too much when they're, yellow card, you got to close the game down and whatever, and that's not helping the fans either. So I think the red card threshold's got to be applied more. They do everything now to just pass the buck, but the guy's still off the field, and that does affect the quality of the game.
But as a coach, how would that be having an impact on the way that you prepare for, say, a test match like this weekend? How are you talking to the players about the TMO? Ewen?
Well, Eddie's probably better to ask than I am. I mean, when Eddie and I were palling around in the coaching world, we used to spend time on, yellow card scenarios. You'd work out how you might cover certain situations and maybe practice something. Even a red card, so you knew who was going to go where. You didn't spend a lot of time on it, but these days it's far more prevalent. The impact of the TMO, that wasn't an issue in my day, but Eddie might be able to speak to that a bit better. I don't know in terms
Eddie?
of preparation.
Well, there's nothing much different, mate. You're making adaptations to the situation if you got a sin bin or a red card. I think the only other thing is that the TMO has created bigger breaks in play, so it's reinforced the importance of leadership on the field. Not that leadership's never been important, but there's more breaks now for the leaders on the field to be very cognizant of what's important at that time and what have they got to do next. So you see the good teams use those breaks really well, and the captains use that really well. The vice captains use that really well, and I think in that way Australia's probably upgraded its team in terms of leadership. I don't have a real feel for how Harry Wilson is as a captain, but I know Parecki's he's a good, solid operator. He's good around the set piece, having played in London Irish for a while. He can work problems out on the field, and Skelton's actually outstanding in terms of bringing a team together. So I think Australia's probably got a little bit stronger in that area. And then the Lions have got, Owen Farrell off the bench. In the last 20 minutes, you wouldn't want a more effective guy to come off the bench in the last 20 minutes and give you a cool, calm head.
Actually, something has struck me, and it's at the moment Australia doesn't have a full-time captain. Harry Wilson is sort of match-to-match proposition. Every time Joe Schmidt's asked about it, he doesn't commit to Harry. He says, Harry's learning and he's getting better, but it always seems to me like, if there's another option, Joe may take it. What's your sense around that in terms of that issue of leadership, that there's not that nailed-on leader, the captain of the national team, Eddie Jones?
Well, Joe's going to finish in a couple of tests, isn't he?
Well, no, next year. Well, yeah. Les Kiss takes over from Joe Schmidt next year.
All right, okay.
No, not November.
It's been extended.
The fact is, has it?
Yeah.
The fact is that, as a coach, you can't manufacture leaders. They're either there or they're not. And if you don't have them, then you've got to go through the process of developing the leaders, which is not a simple process when you're playing top class test matches. So Australia at the moment is probably bereft of natural leaders, and so he's gone with Harry Wilson, who's done a good job for Queensland. He's a young guy. He's just learning his trade at Test rugby, so he's got to try to develop it.
Okay. Ewen McKenzie?
Yeah, I mean, someone's going to be the captain, captain and vice captain, but it doesn't stop anyone else from leading. And so you've got guys like Alatoa, who's sort of captains the Brumbies, and they've got experienced guys there. Slipper, these sort of guys have been around the scene. They've all had a crack at captaining. I think Parecki's another one. So they've actually got a lot of guys that have dabbled in that space. Yes, someone has to talk to the referee, but there's plenty of leadership, particularly in the forwards. I'd probably look more at the backs and go, that's probably a bit light on in the back line for who's making the calls and decisions and maintaining composure in that area, because that's one area when there's multiple phases, whatever, you need to be able to coordinate that area, and that's probably where I'd probably look. It's if they're falling with, Gordon obviously is captain of the Waratahs, but Liner, he's just trying to make game decisions, and so after that, you've got guys who are either possibly quiet or new to the scene. So that's probably the backline area is probably, in terms of leadership, is probably an area where they'd be working hard to try and manage that just during the course of a game. But there's plenty of guys in this. The Wallabies have had experience of leadership and been in different situations and played lots of test matches, and there's no mortgage on that. But ultimately, they need to channel that through. At the moment, it's Harry, and he seems to have maintained that role for a while. They're channeling through him, and Jay seems happy with that.
All right, so listen, let's jump on to the Lions and their team. Eddie Jones, some changes have been made. Genge out, Porter in. I think McCarthy is out because he's injured, but Chesham in. Ringrose was selected at outside centre, but then had to pull out. And so Jones comes back in. But looking at that side, what do you expect on Saturday night from them?
Well, I think firstly, Porter comes in for Genge. I thought Genge was one of their best players last week, but probably the area that worries the Lions coaches is he got penalised 2 or 3 times for hinging, with the Italian referees probably looking for Porter to be more stable in that area. Chesham and McCarthy is like for like. They're big, strong, tough players with good work capacity. So it's pretty much the same side. Obviously, Bundy Arkey comes in at 12, and in on slippery conditions on the Melbourne cricket ground, he'll be a really useful player. Good, strong, tough, hard carrier, hard over the ball. Like, he adds a bit more presence over the ball than the Scottish boy does. So he'll be well suited to those Melbourne conditions, because if it is wet, and the pitch will be pretty slippery, and it'll then become a really tough contest about on the ground and then in the air. And Arkey will certainly add to that. And you can tell players like playing with him. He's one of those blokes they like playing with because he's tough and he keeps going.
Ewen McKenzie, your views?
Oh, look, I agree on the front row change. I mean, that's the only. I mean, they're both good players, but I think that the scrum penalties or the scrum infringements early in the game probably set the tone there. So they probably want to present a different picture. I've been a fan of Chesham. I think he's played really well on the tour. McCarthy played well in that first game, I think, against the Force, and he's sort of got himself into the team on the back of that. But Chesham's been appearing, starting or coming off the bench in a number of games, and I think he's been very consistent as a 6 in the second row. So I actually think it's an improvement having him in the side. Like for like in the midfield, as Eddie said, Bundy's very accomplished, and he's a bigger and pretty aggressive player, so he'll be more of a handful there. I'm sure that they'll be running him, at liner. There's not much difference there, and the bench looks the same. They've got plenty of good guys to come onto the field. So, I don't know. I don't see any weakness there, and probably some logical changes.
Owen Farrell's on the bench. Eddie Jones, he certainly was outstanding against First Nations Pacifica the other day. His leadership, his touches, his ability to organise the players around him. He certainly does seem to strengthen the team considerably by having him there as an option in that back half of the game.
Yeah, behind a dominant pack, him coming on at 10 and 12. Like, you couldn't think of a better player in the world. And the other thing I liked was when there was a bit of a scruffle at the start of the game. Like, he was the first in there, and just he's an aggressive player. Like, if you look back at the First Nations team, what did they do? Because they've gone as close to anyone as beating the Lions. They rolled up the sleeves and they got stuck in, and it looked like they all wanted to do it. Like, I saw two players sprint twice, which I haven't seen for a long time. Really. So that they got, and it might be easy because the boys, the Island boys and the Aboriginal boys, it was easy for them to get together. They had some good people involved in it. Kef, Glenn, Tana, all good guys, and they would have easily got got a good feeling in the grip, and then they just went about to be really physical. And, Owen was the one who stood up and said, no, well, hang on, we can do this as well. And so, he's a handy player to come off the bench, in terms, and we're talking about leadership in the backs. He's useful, really useful.
No, I agree with you on Farrell. I think he's an outstanding option for them to come into the game, and that's where if I look at the Wallaby selection, I'm not seeing the same. With the six, I don't know what you think about the 6-2 bench, but I think we're a bit light on we got some impact there with McDermott coming in, but other than that, it's going to be pretty. We're relying on the backs to go the 80 and keep the intensity up.
Yeah, particularly when you think Wilson and McGrath will probably play 80 each. Like, how do you fit those back rowers in? Like, they're 80-minute players.
No, I don't see Gleeson getting on the field. So that's probably going to have to hold him back and whatever. So I don't know if we're going to get impact for the 6-2 split. But what was interesting in that First Nations game on Tuesday was obviously we talked about the aggression. The performances of Lucan, Uru. I thought those two guys were great in the game, but Uru's been a great player all year. He's been a really good player, and for him not to be in the squad, those guys not being in the squad, I mean, effectively, if you're playing that Tuesday game, you've no chance of playing this weekend. And Tupu's another one. We talked about him. Like, he showed exactly what he's capable of doing at scrum time. And if you get him in the right environment with the right level of excitement, at this point in time, I'd bar him from the gym and just make sure he plays touch football and has fun. So he goes to every training session, plays touch footy, and he's out there playing 60 minutes every week. That's what I would do. And say you can only go to the gym at Christmas time. That's it. Right, no more gym. Just touch football, have fun, big smile on your face. You sneak us 1 or 2 tries a game, and you make sure the scrum's going forward every time. And you do that for 60 minutes every week. That's what you should be doing for Australian rugby, and that's how we need to manage it. And I think it's too late now. He's off to France, but that's how and get him excited about the game there. And don't worry about all the other stuff. You're strong enough to bloody push him backwards now. Don't worry about him getting more stronger. Just get out there and have fun, and touch the ball and get excited about chasing the ball and doing things like that, So those 3 guys, Lucan, Uru, and Tupou, I mean, I'm hoping that those 3 guys might, feature in the 3rd test maybe.
Okay. Your thoughts, Eddie?
Oh, well, you think that Uru try came off the back of Tupou's carry. Big, powerful carry before the line, brings in 3 defenders, dislocates the defence, and then Uru's able to find a spot through. Those 3 guys, that's the best I've seen that Lucan play. He's incredible athlete. He looks like $1 million, but I haven't seen him too many times play like $1 million. But I thought on Tuesday night, he was putting his hand up to carry. And when he carried, he really, really got his head and shoulders through. I think Guru suffers from the other thing. He doesn't look like a good footballer, but he plays like one. He's got a huge work rate.
The Owen Finnegan factor. He's a good player. That I think that Queensland had an abundance of riches in the back 5 this year. So in the end, they rotated all those players through, but ultimately a lot of them didn't get game time. They also, they rotated. They had Canham, and there's all sorts of, and Blythe and Lucan and Uru can play in the second row as well. And they had almost an embarrassment of riches in the back 5, so they had to share the game time. And some of them, I don't think, got to impress on the week-to-week side of things, and somebody missed out on some of the squad selections there. And I think Lucan, I think they definitely showed that. Lucan in particular, he was out to show that he could still play. And it's up to the player. The player, to be fair, has to front up and give a budgeted performance. To be fair to the selectors and coaches, and to be fair to Joe, you've got to give a budgeted performance. You can't be up one game and then drop back to some lowly standard. You have to have a budgeted performance in you that the selectors can go, okay, we can rely on him to give us that. He's going to give us 15 tackles. He's going to give us, 5 ball carries, and he's going to make 30 metres or something like that, and he's going to win 3 lineouts. That's a budgeted performance, right? So we can put that in the bank and then go like that. So we need to be able to have that. And so some of these guys, maybe they've been up and down. Maybe they haven't had enough game time to demonstrate this season by virtue of the way the Super Rugby rolled out and selections and what, I don't know. But there's definitely some talent there sitting in behind the test team that is itching to get a go.
Interestingly, Joe Schmidt did say in his press conference yesterday that, yes, they can take some lessons from the Pacifica game, but he mentioned a statistic that there were 13 line breaks to 2, and that if the Wallabies played that particular way, that it'd be an absolute massacre. Do you agree that they can't actually just pick up the template of what the First Nations Pacifica team did and take it into a test match, Eddie Jones?
Oh, look, I don't think you ever copy someone else's game. But we weren't talking about that, mate. We were talking about the attitude of which they played. Like, they went out there to physically affront the Lions. And I think that's the big thing about – one of the great things about Australian rugby is that we've been physical and we've been smart. And that's given us a point of difference. Like, I was watching that – I think I told you, I was watching that Gold Digger documentary that was done, on Ben Darwin's cohesive factors, which, is a good story. But the enlightening thing was Woodward came on, and he played for Manly in the time that we were playing. And he said that when he was playing club rugby, he found it physically far harder than what he was playing in England. And that's the hard edge we had in Australia, and Southern Hemisphere rugby had that. And I think we've become a bit too nice down here. We need to get back to that really aggressive, go after them type start of the game. And that's the only thing we're talking about in terms of the First Nations, because that got them into the game. Like, they were nowhere near as good a side as the Lions, but it gave them a chance of winning.
Yeah, it put them in the game mentally, and gave them enthusiasm, gave them confidence, and they're all factors that you've got to generate some of that yourself. You can't just rely on the opposition being poor or making mistakes, or the referee's going to get you in the game. You've got to make it happen yourself. So the physical part, go back to the 89 series, there's been some physical Lions series in the past between Australia and the Lions, and so that can be part of the recipe. It doesn't have to be every week, but it can be part of the solution. And it's I think it was if anything, the tour's been pretty nice, and I think that the game the other day was just a little bit different. So everyone thought, oh, that was good, that was interesting,
All right, so listen, we're coming up to time, looking at the perhaps the way the game's going to go, how you feel it's going to go, given it's at the MCG, given the weather conditions. Eddie Jones, give us your prediction on what it is that we might see on Saturday night, and who picks up the win.
So last week I said after the first 20 minutes, I reckon this week after 60, and I reckon Australia might have their nose in front, and then how the last 20 pans out. I think the Lions have probably got the stronger bench and probably suited the conditions if they're like we anticipate them to be. So I anticipate Australia going in the game, going out, playing really well, putting themselves in front, and then maybe the last 20 minutes, because it's going to be a high penalty game, the Lions kick a couple of penalties to win the game.
All right. Okay, Ewen McKenzie?
Yeah, I think I'd probably agree. I mean, the weather will be the factor, and I think Australia's going to be more motivated and be more up, and I think that they'll get the crowd with them for a while. But I think the last 20 minutes, and I think I think the way that they've picked their bench, the Lions, I think with Farrell in particular coming into the game, they've got guys that can really close that out if they need to, and they'll play at the right end of the field at the right time. And if they have to win by penalty, they'll be happy with that, because that's series over. So I think Australia gives themselves a chance, but it's really going to be how we handle the 6-2 bench and how they come into the game. I'd like to see some of those front rowers in there maybe a bit earlier, and so we can get some momentum and carry. I just don't know. I don't know if we're going to be able to impose ourselves early in the game, but we'll certainly be competitive. There's no question about that.
Okay. So just a final question then on that last 20 minutes. As coaches, how do you think about that last 20 minutes, and does it depend on what's happening on the field, or do you have a general plan about how you're going to get yourself to the end of the game? How is it that you think about the last 20 minutes of the game? You've spoken a lot in this podcast about the importance of the start, but how do you think about that last 20 minutes? Eddie Jones.
Well, I think, like Ewen said before, you need to practice it. You need to practice the last 20 minutes of the game. So you need to practice segments, whether you've got to look after the ball, you've got to try to force a penalty, what you've got to try to do. So you've got to practice those scenarios, and every team does that now. But I think the big thing is the timing of your changing of your replacements. That's the big thing. You can sometimes go too early, and sometimes you can go too late. But when you've got momentum against you, the only thing you can generally change momentum is by changing the players. And so who have Lions got on the bench that can change momentum? Mate, Genge can, Farrell can in his own way, Alex Mitchell can in their own way. So you got three guys there that are crucial.
Morgan.
Who can do it for us? I'm not so sure about him. Yeah, he's handy, but I think he got found out a little bit in the First Nations game that his collision work in terms of his tackle probably wasn't as good as you'd like it to be. But I think, who can do it for Australia off the bench? That's the question. Who can? Maybe the Force back rower, what's his name, the Italian boy? He goes pretty hard at the break. He can get you a few balls back.
Yeah, you got Pollard, Bell, Tizzano, and McDermott. They're the four guys. They're going to do something, change tempo, whatever. But it's the other thing is, and I'm not a modern coach, but everyone seems to make their replacements based on the clock. Like the clock ticks up and it gets to the 60-minute mark, and suddenly everyone runs on the field. And I've made replacements after 30 minutes. I know Eddie's done the same. You got to be watching the game, and you got to say, is this going to get better or worse? And it's pretty dramatic when you take the 5-8 off after 30 minutes. But sometimes you have to do that to be able to get the outcome. If it's just not working, it's not going to work. So you can't just wait till the 60 minutes because that was the plan. So you got to read the game and and put the players on when you think you're going to need them. And so that's what I'm saying with the front row bench we've got. Maybe they should be on there earlier. They should not waiting at the old 60-minute mark to see what's going on. So you've got to read that as the head coach and make the call.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and particularly in this game where we've spoken about it's a consequence game. If Australia are trailing and momentum's behind, they probably need to go early. Get people on there that can change the game. Don't wait for the game to unfold. Put the players out there and take the game by the scruff of the neck. And as Ewan said, like Bell, Pollard, McDermott, the flanker, they're all go-forward players. They all get into the contest quickly and they'll give you something different. It's hard to see Australia being able to sustain it, Frady. That's the thing I can't see. Yeah, I reckon they'll be able to do it for a period of time, but can they do it for a whole 80 minutes?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, that'll be the challenge, and obviously they're playing in it's a different stadium environment. It's not a natural environment for them either. So whether they get the value from the crowd or not, I'm not sure. But it's if you're betting your house on it, you wouldn't be betting on. You say they're going to come up maybe 10, 15 minutes short in terms of being able to get there. But I'd like to be wrong,
And you'd like to think they just give themselves a chance of winning, which they did in the last game. Like, get out there and get into the game.
Well, I'd be disappointed if they thought that the last game's scoreboard was enough. I mean, they got close. They got within 10 points at the end of the game, but they were never within it. They were never in the contest. The Lions weren't going to lose the game. So it's just a matter of them managing the last period of the game. So I think with Farrell there, they got a really good guy to see out the game and game manage it calmly and make sure everyone doesn't lose the plot if it is a bit tight.
Well, gentlemen, there is just so much to look forward to. You've fired me up again. I was not as optimistic, but again, you've described a path forward for the Wallaby team on Saturday night in this all-important fixture, because it's all over as the series is concerned if the Wallabies are unable to perform, and let's just hope we do get a performance on what will be a cold and wet night at the magnificent stadium that is the MCG. Now, just a further reminder, if you'd like to subscribe, we had, as I mentioned at the top of the program, a huge jump in the number of listeners last week. So if you would like to like, subscribe, and certainly jump onto our socials at Instagram, LinkedIn, or TikTok, that would be greatly appreciated. But certainly a subscription means that you will never miss another episode of Rugby Unity, and we would love you to be a part of that. And indeed, we are on Substack, as I mentioned, some technical analysis by Favourable Moments, who digs into the data, which helps us to look at what may happen on this weekend. There is a column from me, and there is also the guide to Melbourne for everybody who is in this great city as we head to Saturday night's test match. So a very big thank you to all of you, wherever you are in the world, for your support of Rugby Unity. It is greatly appreciated as we look to help to secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. A big thanks to my co-hosts, Ewen McKenzie and Eddie Jones. But for the moment, please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.